month of Teves, and we are at the top of Daf Tzadi Amud Aleph, where the Gemara is going to be detailing and dealing with a question that we asked at the bottom of Peites Amud Beis. The Gemara asks the question based on the din of the Brisa that was quoted a little bit earlier in the Amud, that the Brisa told us that should be somebody that Tan Rabban that somebody wants to register other people on his Pesach or on his Chagiga, the money that they give him, the money that they pay him to buy into his Karban, that's Chulin. That is Chulin. And Ula, or maybe Rabbi Oshia had asked the question at the bottom of Peites Amud Beis. Maybe our Babylonian colleagues know what exactly is going on here. How did it end up that if the Karban is Kaddish and the money that you have set aside is also Kaddish, meaning that both of them are Hektish, how do you have money that was Hektish, that pays for Hektish, and then all of a sudden the money is going to be Chulin? How did that make any sense? And now the Gemara is going to, on Daf Tzadi Amud Aleph, is going to explain this to us based on the statements of Abaye. Abaye is going to resolve the question, and forewarning to this Amud is the Amud a little bit reads backwards, meaning Abaye is going to present his argument, and then we're only going to thereafter get the information that we need in order to make sense of his argument. You'll see what I'm talking about. But if there's a piece of this that you don't understand or doesn't make sense yet, don't worry. That is 100% normal. Abaye says as follows. This is the top of Tzadi Amud Aleph. Abaye says, "Ilav de ukma Rabbi Oshia lahahi." If not for the fact that Rabbi Oshia had explained a particular Mishnah in Maseches Tmura, be-memane zayin al pischai, that it is in a case of a person that pays a prostitute by including her in his Karban Pesach, meaning payment for her services. He says, instead of me paying you, come and join my Karban Pesach. She's a frum prostitute. She wants to make sure that she's included in Karban Pesach. So he says, I'll pay you with a kazayas of Karban Pesach. And that Mishnah that discusses that din is for Rebbe here. This is also the opinion of Rebbe. If not for the fact that Rabbi Yoshi had said that it's talking about a zona in the Karban Pesach, and that this is the opinion of Rebbe, I would have said that price is talking about. I would have explained that price, says Abaye. But Kachim Kalim, that we are talking about all Kachim Kalim, not just Karban Pesach, meaning Shlamim and Chagiga, Va'alibed Rabbi Yossi Aglili, and that it's not the opinion of Rebbe, it's the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Aglili. The Amar who says Kachim Kalim Mamin Balim who says that Kachim Kalim still are the belongings, still are the property of the owners. It belongs to the owners. It doesn't transfer in terms of the property to Mammon Hektish. It doesn't belong to the Beis Hamikdash. So, in general, just as a introduction here, if I have a Karban, we should be Zacha. If I have a Karban, that Karban, before I've made it into a Karban, it is my property. I buy an animal, it belongs to me. Once I dedicate it as a Karban, in certain circumstances, it is going to become the property of the Beis Hamikdash. And depending on what it is, and we've seen before, and we will see a little later, can you sell it? Can you exchange it? Can you use it for any kind of monetary compensation? That's going to be an important question with regards to not the kedusha of it, but the ownership status of it. Who does it actually belong to? And Abaye is saying that there is a particular brisa, that there's a particular mission, Maseches Tmura, that Rabbi Oshia told us is talking about the opinion of Rebbe, and that it is talking about somebody that's inviting a zona to his Karban Pesach. And Abaye says, I wouldn't have said that. But since Rabbi Oshia did, I think that I'm going to defer to Rabbi Oshia. What's the important distinction to understand now is that according to Abaye is saying that I would have said that this is Kachim Kalim, which is Mam Balim, who belongs to the owners, Aval Pesach, but with regards to Pesach, with regards to Pesach in general, Loi Meshayir Inish, a person does not withhold anything. Be Ma'os. He doesn't withhold anything from the Kedusha of the Karban. When he says this is going to be a Karban Pesach, it means entirely. Meaning that this, he knows, is 100% aware of the fact that he's not going to hold back the Kedusha of this animal in any monetary capacity. It is going to be fully belonging to the Beis HaMikdash. It's now Mammon Hektish. However, B'ma'os, with regards to money that a person is setting aside to use for Korban Pesach, Vadei Mishayir Inish, there he is, when he says this money is going to be used for Pesach, meaning for my Korban Pesach, he for sure is still withholding that money as his own. He says, I'm going to use it for that. So he's saying that it is not Mom and Hektish. It doesn't belong to the Beis HaMikdash. He's saying, I'm setting this aside to be used for Mom and Hektish. Later, I'm going to use it, but it's still mine, 100% mine now. Because when he sets aside the money, he is setting it aside with the intention that he's going to be using it to purchase a korban, meaning it's mine. It's my money, and I'm going to use it to purchase a korban. The korban, once the animal has been purchased, I know that that's going on the Mizbech, that's going to be Mom and Hektish. But the money is not. So we're dealing with how do you have Hektish money that is paying for a Hektish object, and the money comes out Chulin. So we're now saying that the money is not necessarily Hektish to start with. Okay. Continuing. V'ha Rebbehi, is this not the opinion of Rebbe? And that's the reason that the money is going to be Chulin. And then the parentheses really just is repeating what we just said, which is the Pesach lo Mishayir Inish, but must vada Mishayir Inish, because the money is still retaining to be his own. Vehahi, and then the case of Temura. Within the case of Temura, that mission that we are not yet quoting, but that Abai is using, the Kamoikila Rabbi Yoshia Kerebi, that Rabbi Yoshia had said was the opinion of Rebbe. I would not have said that that's the opinion of Rebbe. The Pesach lo Mishayir Inish, because with regards to Pesach, a person does not withhold any kind of ownership on it. He is saying it's completely hektish. Which is also that parentheses is a repetition of what we said before, and in some of the girsas it's not there, but it is a repetition. It's not adding new information to the sugya. Okay, and now he wants to explain why he did not want. Where Abai says, I would not have said that this mission works like is the opinion of Rabbi. Why did he not say it like Rabbi Yosef Glili? Why did Rabbi Yosef not say this Rabbi Yosef Glili? Because the second part of that Mishnah teaches us that if a person sells to a purchaser, the seller sells to a purchaser, he's oila or ishlamim lo'asav leklum, he hasn't done anything, meaning nothing occurred and no transfer of ownership has happened whatsoever. But that's meaning that would be the opinion of Rebbe. But Rabbi Yossi Glili does hold that shlamim can transfer ownership. So you can't say that this mission is the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Glili. You have to say that it's the opinion of Rebbe. And now let's get to how this makes sense in our sugya. And now that Rabbi Yoshi has said that this Mishnah is the opinion of Rebbe, and we're talking about that he's paying a prostitute by including her in his Korban Pesach, and this is the opinion of Rebbe. Shmamina, what comes out from here, the Sphirale, that according to Rebbe, afilu b'pischa mishar inish, that according to Rebbe, a person still retains some level of ownership with regards to his Korban Pesach. Why? Because apparently there is going to be a possibility of a person attempting to pay a prostitute by including her in his Korban Pesach. And that would be a problem. Because, meaning there's a problem of Korbanos being used to pay prostitutes. That's an Isidarais of Esen and Zaina. You're not allowed to bring a Korban from the payment of a prostitute. That's Mefursha and Isidarais. And the fact that we're talking about this Isidarais in this context means that there is at least the possibility of a payment with a Korban Pesach, which must be that there is some level of ownership that is retained by the original owner. So this is going to be Abaye's broad discussion here. How do you have Mammon Hektish that is paid for an animal which is Hektish and yet turns out Chulin? So says Abaye, this is the opinion of Rebbe, who will tell you that the mammon is not hektish and the animal is not hektish, at least not completely. The money is still somewhat chulin, and the carbon is also somewhat chulin. And therefore, the money could end up still retaining its status of chulin, and the person that is receiving the money will be able to use it for whatever they want. And now let's get into the weeds of what Abai was talking about. Maihi de Rabbi Oshia. What exactly was the statement of Rabbi Oshia? Ditnan says, we learned this in the Mishnah. That if a person gave a zona, a prostitute, a payment of mukdashim, of things that belong to the Beis Hamikdash, harei elu mutarim, they can be used on the mizbech. Meaning, if a person dedicates an olah and says, this is going to be an olah, and then says to a prostitute, this is your payment, he doesn't have the right to do so, and it didn't become an esnan zona because it's not his. He happens to have it on his property, but it's not his korban. I mean, it's not his animal. The animal now belongs to the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore, since he has no monetary rights to it, the offering of payment of it is nonsense. However, oifas de chulin, with regards to birds which are chulin, birds, chicken, or really, Rashi tells us that Torah b'nei Yonah, she'enim mukdashim, things that could be put on the mizbeach, Torah b'nei Yonah, that are pigeons and turtle doves that are not hektish. Harei elo asurim. If he pays her with it, then for sure they would be. They're going to be mukdashim, but he wants to pay her with it. Those would be asurim. Shahaya bedin. Why do we need to explain that the oifus of chulin would be asur? That seems to be a dead giveaway. Obvious, the pasuk tells you that. Why does that need to be discussed at all? This is going to be Rav Oshia's central point here. Shahaya bedin, it's logical. Uma im mukdashim. If you have things that are hektish, shamum paisel bahem, that if they have a mum, if they have a blemish, they will not be able to be put onto the mizbeach. Ein esnan umechir chal alem, and nevertheless, they are not able to have. It's not going to be able to have an esnan zona applied to it. So an animal which is hektish that would become possible if it had a mum, doesn't have a mum, but it would become possible if it had a mum, and esnan and mechir are not going to apply to it. Mechir is mechir kelev. If a person exchanges a sheep for a dog, so that sheep is now called a mechir kelev. You cannot use that on the mizbeach either. That's a psul of mechir kelev. You can't put that on the mizbeach. But if it became possible, these animals would become possible, and esnan and mechir don't apply to them. Ofes she'ein hamum paisel bahen. With regards to birds, that mumin, at least the same mumin, don't apply to birds. Birds do not have the same limitations of mumin. Meaning, if it's missing a limb, missing a wing, or whatever, then it would be possible. But a bird that has some mumin is going to be mutter. So we see that birds are more makel with regards to mumin. Would it not be even more logical that the esnan mechir shouldn't apply to it at all? Meaning, if something that has a mum that is susceptible to the din of mumin doesn't have the issue of mechir and esnan, something that is less susceptible to mumin surely should not be susceptible to mechir and esnan. Amarle say so. Talmud, for that reason, the Torah tells you the following pasuk: L'chol neder. The Torah says, for all nedarim. This is the pasuk in Devarim. Lo savi esnan zona mechir kelev beis Hashem alekecha. Don't bring an esnan zona, the wages of a prostitute, or the value of a dog, the exchange of a dog. Beis Hashem alekecha, to the house of Hashem your God. L'chol neder, for any vow. Ki tavas Hashem alekecha gam shnehem, because this is despicable loathsome to Hashem. Both of these things are disgusting to Hashem. Talmud Lemer l'chol neder, back in the Gemara. Talmud Lemer, the before the pasuk says l'chol neder, for any vow l'rabas as office, to even include office, that an oath is also subject to the psul of Eslan Zona, even though it's not subject to the laws of psul. That's the chiddush that the Mishnah is teaching us. Kal v'chomer lemukdashim me'ata. Now, how does this further our argument? Kal v'chomer, you can make the following kal v'chomer lemukdashim me'ata. You can now explain a kal v'chomer with regards to things that are hektish. Ma oifes she'ein hamun paisel bahem. If birds which mumin are not going to affect, esnan mechir chal alehem, esnan mechir are going to affect, mukdashim she'amun paisel bahem, then for sure korbanos, which a mum would paisel them, ein adin she'esnan mechir chal alehem, is it not obvious that esnan mechir would apply to them? Talmud Lomar, therefore the pasuk says, l'chol neder, for every neder, pratlin dar, to the exclusion of something which has already been dedicated. That's the limud. So the limud is from the Kal V'chomers that once the pasuk says l'chol neder, it means for anything that you're going to use as a neder. It means that if something has already had a neder on it, it's already hektish, and you use it as an Eslan Zona, and you're going to be transacting with it. Once it's hektish already, then Eslan doesn't apply to it. Ela time in the cause of Rahmana, if that's true, then why is it that the pasuk says time in the cause of Rahmana neder? Why does the Torah have to say? Why does the Torah say a neder as opposed to something which has been dedicated already, something that you're using, that you're going to be dedicating, as opposed to something that you have already? Halav hachi, if not for this pasuk, havamina, I would have said, mugdashim chal isur esnan alem. If you didn't have this pasuk, I would have said that all things that are hektish are in fact subject to an Esnan Zona. Once it becomes hektish, it's still subject to Esnan Zona, to the Isur of Esnan Zona. And now you have a problem. Fundamentally, you have a problem that a person cannot make something that doesn't belong to him, cannot make it asur. Meaning, if it doesn't belong to me, then I don't have the ability to transact in it in such a way that it becomes asur. So the pasuk that says l'chol neder, which we have learned, which we are using to learn, that once you've dedicated something to the Beis Hamikdash, it does not, you don't have the ability of making it asur with an esron or a mechir. That should be obvious because fundamentally, you cannot make something asur if it doesn't belong to you. Meaning the transaction wouldn't exist. So why does the pasuk have to tell me this at all? Meaning this should have been obvious from all the Kal V'chomers, from all the rationale that we've discussed. It's a little complicated. Here's going to be the punchline. Amar Rav Oshia, says Rav Oshia, what is this case that the Torah needs to tell you this din of l'chol neder b'memane zayna al pischai v'rebihi? That we are talking about a case of a man that has a Korban Pesach and he wants to be with a prostitute, and he exchanges a kazayis of his Korban Pesach for the services of this prostitute. V'rebihi, and this is the opinion of Rebbe, who we had discussed beforehand, that says that a person retains ownership over their money. That's where the pasuk is talking about. L'chol neder is telling me, functionally speaking, that somebody that sets aside a Korban Pesach still retains a level of ownership in it, that you need the pasuk in the Torah to tell you l'chol neder, that even once you have made it into a neder, once you've dedicated it, that Eslan Zona is still asur, and in addition, and the money that another person were to pay, on this is not mom and hektish yet or ever. And therefore, you have the korban, which is not entirely hektish, and the money, which is not entirely hektish. And that's how you can end up with the money being chulin. Okay. And now, and this is what I said at the beginning, that we learned the sugya backwards. Now the Gemara is going to tell you, my Rebbe, what is this opinion of Rebbe that we keep on quoting? The Tanya that Rebbe teaches us in the following brisa. Im yemait habayit miyos miseh. If the pasuk says in the Torah, Im yemait habayit miyos miseh, if there is too few people in the house to have a sheep. That's the pasuk in Shema. Moshe Rabbeinu is telling the Jewish people leaving Mitzrayim, you have to make korban Pesach, and if there aren't enough people to make a korban Pesach with one family, then gather together a few families in one home, which is the pasuk we've quoted a number of times, the end of that pasuk, that there isn't enough people in the house for the sheep. What does that mean? Says Rebbe as follows. This is the opinion of Rebbe. If there aren't enough people in the house to have a sheep, what does that mean? Then you can sustain the lamb, the sheep, from itself. Then fill in the gap of the missing piece from the sheep itself. What does this mean? It says, Rebbe is reading the pasuk, it doesn't mean if there aren't enough people to finish eating it. It means if you don't have enough money to purchase a lamb. So then what do you do? Means what you should do is sell off pieces of it. Meaning, one person says, I'm going to buy it, and you guys have to chip in, and then we'll gather together. Which is the case that we're talking about of somebody having money that they are contributing to the Korban Pesach. Michdi. Michdi achila. Sorry. Michdi achila for the sake of eating it. V'loi michdi mekach. But not for the sake of transacting in it. Meaning, you can charge people to buy into your Korban Pesach if you need the money to afford a Korban Pesach. But you cannot charge people for a Korban Pesach and then use the money for something else. Which would mean that the money is not chulin. Rebbe says, af michdei mekach, that you can also use that money for anything else. The money is chulin. She'im ein lai, because if he doesn't have enough money, memane acher imay al pischa ve'al chagigasa, then he can register another person with him for his Pesach and his Chagiga. And the money that he receives from it is chulin. He can use whatever he wants. Because it was for these purposes, meaning it was on this condition that the Jewish people made the Pesach into a Pesach, meaning they took the animal and they said, I'm dedicating this as a Korban Pesach. But if somebody wants to buy into it, they can buy into it and I'll use that money. Meaning the intention is I'm going to use it for a Pesach, but it's not entirely hektish yet. It's only going to be hektish at the point of shchita. That's when it's going to be fully hektish. Right now, I can still transact in it. That's the opinion of Rebbe based on the pasuk. Rabbi and Rabbi Zera, there's a machlokes in Rabbi and Rabbi Zera with regards to this machlokes. Chad Amar, one of them says, with regards to using the money that you earn from Korban Pesach, from somebody buying into Korban Pesach, everybody agrees, both Rebbe and the Tanakama of this brisa, since this is for the purpose of the Korban Pesach, you need this money in order to buy wood for the Korban Pesach. It is a Pesach purpose. It is the same as the din of Korban Pesach. Everybody agrees that you can use the money to be able to afford to roast the Korban Pesach. Not just the animal itself, but the accoutrements, the things that you need in order to roast it. The argument is, and we haven't seen these words in a long time in our Maseches. We're going to see it, please God, very soon in the 10th parak, all over. But b'matzah amarar, The machlokes is with regards to purchasing matzah mara. Rabbanan Sabra, the Rabbanan of the opinion that this is not part of the current Pesach. It is a separate act of achila. The Torah is mechayiv you to eat it. So good, you have to eat matzah and mara. The Rebbe is of the opinion, Keva and the Echsher the Pesachu, since you need matzah and mara in order to eat the Hillel sandwich, which is the way that it was done in the Beis Hamikdash. This might be that machlokes, whether or not you have to have it that way, but we'll get there later. Kevin the Echsher the Pesachu, since you need this in order to be able to eat your Korban Pesach, Kuguva the Pesach Dami, it is as if it is part of the Korban Pesach itself. That is the machlokes between Abaye, between Rebbe and the Tanakama. Now, this is different from the way that Rav Oshia had explained this brisa. Fundamentally, meaning the way that the Amoraim here are explaining this, Rabbi and Rabbi Zera are explaining this different from the opinion of Rabbi Oshia, because according to Rabbi Oshia, the money is always going to be chulin. And according to Rabbi and Rabbi Zera, Rabbi is not debating about the money being completely chulin. He thinks that you can use it for things that are Pesach adjacent, but not for anything else. And it's just the machlokas of what's called Pesach adjacent. Nevertheless, meaning now we have an additional way of understanding the opinion of Rebbe. But however, the other opinion, we had Rabbi and Rabbi Zera that explained that this is the machlokas between Rebbe and the Tanakama. One of them, Rabbi and Rabbi Zera, explains that we just said now that it's a machlokas about matzah and mara, and the other one says v'chad amar. The other one says b'matzah and mara, with regards to matzah and mara, kule amaloi pligi. Everybody agrees that you can eat them. You have to eat them with matzah umrarim. Everybody agrees to the fact that you can use it, both Rebbe and the Tanakama. Since you need this in order to eat the Pesach, it's as if you are using the money for Pesach. Keep ligi, way they argue is likach by chaluk, likach by talis. To use it to buy a chaluk shirt or to buy a talis, to buy a cloak, which is not related to Korban Pesach. This is the opinion of Rabbi Oshia. Rabbanan Sabra, the Rabbanan of the opinion, Michyos Miseh Marachman, that the Torah says, Michyos Miseh, Miyos Miseh, sorry, Rabbi had said Michyos, Miyos Miseh Amarachmana, that if you don't have enough from having a lamb, Hechyehu Leseh, you can use the money for the things that are needed for the seh, for the sheep. The rabbis of the opinion, Hechye Atzmecha Miseh, that you can use the money, the proceeds of the seh for yourself. Miyos Miseh, Michyos Miseh, use that as what you need, meaning from Michi. You can use it for yourself. You can use the money for yourself. The money is still chulin. Okay. Ula Abaye, and according to Abaye, who started this whole discussion, the Amar who had told us, Ilav de Ukme Rabbi Oshia Lahai, if not for the fact that Rabbi Oshia had told us that this Mishnah in Tamura was talking about an esnan of a zona through Kazais of Korban Pesach, and that this was the opinion of Rebbe. If not for the fact that Rabbi Oshia told us this, but man zona al Pesach ve Rebbe he, having mukmin law be kachim kalim ba'ali with the Rabbi Oshia Glida. I would have said that this whole thing is about kachim kalim, and it's the opinion of Rabbi Oshia Glida that this is not Rebbe and this is not Korban Pesach. The Amar who says kachim kalim amin balamu. The kachim kalim are the property of the balim, property of the kachim kalim in general. Always property of the owners originally. It doesn't transfer property. But with regards to Pesach, and that meaning that Rabbi Yossi Aglili says that it's Mam Balam Avav Pesach lo misharinish. But maybe Rebbe is of the opinion that says that a person dedicates the Korban Pesach entirely. Maybe this is not the opinion of Rebbe. Rebbe thinks that the person dedicates the Korban Pesach entirely, that there's no conversation about transacting in it whatsoever. Haketani Behedya, we learned explicitly with regards to Rebbe's opinion. How could it be that Abaye says, I would have thought that? We learned it in the Brisa, that the Jewish people intended when they dedicated the Korban Pesach that they'd be able to have other people buy into it. Says the Gemara, no. Now for this, the Jewish people have been makdish their ma'os for their Pesach, that they dedicate the money, but not that they dedicate the Pesach itself with reservations. It's unreserved, no reservations on dedicating the animal, but they do have reservations on dedicating the money. They hold that back so that it's still chulin, they'd be able to transact in it. That would have been the Havamina of Abaye. That was the Havamina, if not for the fact that Rabbi Yoshi had said that that's not true. That that this mission is the opinion of Rebbe, it's not the opinion of Rabbi Yoshi Aglili, that we wouldn't have said that. Okay. That is the conclusion of this sugya. According to Abaye, Abaye had a thought experiment. Maybe this is the opinion of Rabbi. Maybe it's the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Aglili. We just wrapped up to say that's not the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Aglili. He concedes that it's the opinion of Rabbi, and that Rabbi Yossi is correct. And the way that you dedicate the Korban Pesach, according to Rabbi, is that you dedicate the Korban Pesach. Good. You still have reservations about it. You still say it belongs to me. Belongs to me, and therefore it is possible to make a transaction theoretically of an Esnan Zona within the Korban Pesach, and that's why the pasuk says Kol Neder, to include that as well, that would also be Aser. That's also true, and that's what the pasuk is coming to tell me, and that's the intention, that it would still be Aser, that even if there's no transaction of any money, but you're saying you come and join my Korban Pesach, and people have reservations about their money, that they haven't dedicated completely, and therefore you have chulin, purchasing chulin, and therefore the money is still chulin. That's the answer. And now the Gemara quotes the next Mishnah, 4 lines from the bottom of the Tzadi Amud Aleph, and this is a Mishnah that we have seen quoted earlier. The Mishnah earlier had at least discussed these dinim. Zav Shirash Sheri is, if you have a Zav that saw 2 sightings of a discharge, that sees 2 sightings, so he's not yet a full Zav. I mean, he is a full Zav. He has to have Shivan Ikim. Shecht Alav Bishvi, you can shecht on his behalf on the 7th day, even though he is not yet able to eat from it, but by the time he goes to the mikveh that night, he'll be able to eat from it. Meaning he is more or less a Tvul Yom. He's waiting until nightfall in order to become Tahar. He's not yet Tahar, but he's going to be. You can shecht it on his behalf then. Rosh Shalosh, if he saw 3, so then Shech Alav B'Shmini Shalai, then you'd be able to Shech for him on his 8th day, even though he hasn't yet brought his Karban, that makes him row to eat from it, because he can still bring it before Shkia, and since he could bring it before Shkia, it's as if he is able theoretically to be able to eat from the Korban Pesach, and we'll discuss all of these in the Gemara. Shomer's Yom Kenegid Yom, if you have a woman that is keeping a day, meaning watching every day to make sure that she doesn't have a discharge, meaning there's nothing that comes out of her, and she's making sure that she's not during the Yemei Ziva, not a Nida, but during the Yemei Ziva, she's making sure that she's free from any blood, and she is waiting that night to be Tahara. Shechtan Lebe Sheni Shalat, on her 2nd day, you'd be able to shecht for her. But Rosh Day Yom, if she sees 2 consecutive days, Shechtan Lebe Shlishi, you'd be able to shecht for her on the 3rd day, because then she'd be able to eat at night. Ve'azava, but if she's a Zava completely, meaning she's a Zava Gdala, then she's still 3 consecutive days. During the 11 days of Ziva, not during the days of Nida, then you shecht for her on her 8th day. And we will Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach talk about all of these halachas in the up and coming Amudim. It's a long one. This one's a bit of a doozy in terms of the cheshbonos and the calculations, a big shakach. And we'll Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach see you tomorrow.